What's been your preference in the past in terms of your own preparation? Have you gone for a lower fat diet to try and increase, I guess, the volume of food that you're able to eat when you're in a deficit? Is that something you've kind of aimed for in the past?
I generally just focus on calories and protein, and I don't worry about it too much, so long as I'm getting a serving of fruit and or vegetables at every meal, and I just kind of let it fall where it lies, or lie where it falls. You know what I'm saying? But for me, I don't have a very high energy expenditure relative to my body mass. So when I'm dieting, if you give me those same minimums, it's pretty close to like that's what my diet is, at a certain phase at least. So I tend to be on a relatively moderate to low fat and carbohydrate intake. So I live the good life. But yeah, I generally, my default setting for people is to be on, because they're, athletes are dieting, and there is, like you said, a greater food volume when you're focusing a bit more on keeping your fats relatively low. But I mean, honestly, you're not going to be on a high carb diet while you're contest prepping. You'll be on a moderate carb diet at best. Is to kind of focus a little on the lower end of the fat and then more moderate to high carb intake, unless the person has got a track record of feeling better with something flipped.
In the context of my own prep at the moment, some of the different hunger hacks you might have used in the past. One of those that I've found quite useful at the moment is, as I said before, in relation to food volume, pumpkin. So roasting pumpkin and the amount of volume of pumpkin you can get through in relation to, say, something like sweet potato. Or is there anything like that you've utilized in the past where to sort of help you get through those periods when you're in a deficit, quite a deep deficit late in a prep?
No, absolutely. Leveraging things that are low energy density, high in fiber is a great way to go. So essentially that just means, eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. I think that is absolutely a good way to go. I think bigger picture, having a sufficient step count and activity level, but not an excessive one, does seem to regulate hunger a little better for most people. Having a consistent meal schedule and knowing what's coming on a day-to-day basis. And then also not being under the impression that hunger is necessarily a problem until it is, that it is a normal expected consequence of being in a deficit. It doesn't indicate your body is being harmed, there's nothing wrong. And kind of like, the narratives we have around pain, sometimes we can get quite afraid of it. We probably don't want to have narratives around hunger that are any more than it needs to be, like attaching, additional meaning. I think also understanding that hunger will be there to some degree. You want it to be as minimally distracting as possible, but spending all of your time and effort thinking about meal prep, how to reduce it, can sometimes cause a little more harm than good. The athletes I see who struggle the least with hunger are athletes who have a life outside of bodybuilding. So that when mealtime comes, they don't have time to do a 45-minute like macronator prep, and they're not making it like fun time. I like to cook and really obsess over how to make my meals as voluminous as possible. But they have some basic structure. They eat, 4 meals each time. They've got a good serving of fibrous vegetables and or a fruit, and they have a lean protein source, and they do it and they go about their day. And then they think about when they're going to have long stretches of time where they're not eating, and they start to bias their meals so that they have a little more fat, fiber, and total volume of food, to start off one of those periods, and they eat smaller meals at other times. So I think a lot of it is also perspective and structure and having the right understanding that it is normal to be hungry on a contest prep. It can't be completely mitigated, and being relatively accepting of that, I think, is important. There's actually even some data on successful weight loss maintenance and weight loss on what's called acceptance-based therapy, which is kind of acknowledging like there is no hack, there is no shortcut. This may be challenging, but based upon my values, it's worth it. And I think that can also be applied to competitive bodybuilding.
In the last episode, Eric, we spoke to Mackenzie Baker, and Mackenzie was talking in the last episode a little bit about, flexible dieting, tracking, intuitive eating. And some of the things we were talking about in that episode related to some of the pros and cons associated with tracking. And I watched a few videos of you on YouTube coming into this episode, and just wanted to get a little bit of an understanding about your early days when you started competing. And one of the things that you mentioned as a personal anecdote was that when you started competing, I think your first season, you were tracking and you had some struggles with food, probably didn't get as lean as you probably could have or would have liked to.
Yeah, I had zero issues with adherence in my 2007 prep, but I had a tremendously challenging time. And I was like, I can't keep dieting for more than 4 or 5 months. And I got into pretty good shape at the time, but obviously I wasn't like diced. The biggest issue I had, which actually led to the formation of 3D Muscle Journey, was that I had a massive rebound after my first season, which was the real issue, where I went from a stage weight of about 80 kilos up to a body weight of like 102 within like 2.5, 3 months.